past, a birthright being squandered by corruption in Albany, and the depredations of an insecure, scheming mountebank posing as governor, who loathes both us and himself. As liberty beckoned to enslaved peoples behind the Iron Curtain via American broadcasts after World War II, we now say, believe, rise, and join us. Welcome to Radio Free New York. And we do not have Andrew Hollister with us this Friday afternoon. In his stead, we have Kevin Wilson, Libertarian at large, I guess we'll call him.
Yeah, sure. That sounds good. What a great title. No, I am subbing in for Andrew today here on Radio Free New York on WYSL. I managed to get the Facebook live stream going. I did not bring the equipment for anything else.
Took a little doing.
Yeah, no, I mean, we got it with like 10 seconds to spare, so plenty of time.
This is as good as a mile or something like that. Yeah,
exactly. Well, so thanks again, Andrew, for letting me sub in today. He is out in Vermont, I think, doing a dog race. So he's out doing that.
A dog race.
Yeah, like the Iron Dog. His wife's doing that.
Oh.
So yeah, they're out doing that.
Oh, it's a photography assignment.
No, I think they're doing the race.
They're just going to do the race.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure he'll post about it sometime later. But yeah, he's out doing that. So I get to be in talking to you guys today, and one of the topics that I wanted to talk about that I don't think Andrew's covered yet is talking about climate change. I don't know if he's talked about that in a little while.
Maybe tangentially, not much.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about what was going on with the climate strikes that are happening. Have you been following those, Bob?
Yeah. I mean, this is a news and talk radio station, so all that stuff.
Oh, good. You're listening to the news.
Well,
catch it.
I can't listen to it all the time, but yeah, the climate demonstrations and strikes and everything. The Swedish girl, Greta Thunberg, is it? Thunberg. Okay.
Yeah. So Greta Thunberg, who's the Swedish girl. She's I think 16 years old.
Mm-hmm.
She got to go speak at the UN Climate Summit, and she's been leading these climate strikes. They're supposed to be youth oriented, right? They're supposed to be getting students out. In New York City, the school district let the students skip school in order to attend the climate strikes in mid-September.
In a lot of cities.
Yeah, in a lot of cities, which we could talk about that if you want, but so they've led these climate strikes, and the whole idea behind them is that we only have a few years left to address the global climate change problem, or we're all going to die.
Yeah.
And that's
over.
Really, that's really the language that people are using. It's not merely things are going to get bad, not merely the weather's going to change. It's that this is an existential crisis for humanity itself, for the entire planet.
Yeah, with like a really short fuse.
Yes.
Like I think that one of Greta's points that she was making was to the effect that in 6 months or 18 months or some very close time horizon, that everything's going to become irreversible.
Right. And that's the way people are presenting it, right? Within the next 11 years, we're going to have a 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius climate change that's going to be irreversible, that's going to destroy the environment in its entirety, cause mass extinctions, things like that. And that in order to stop the climate crisis that she has convinced not only herself, but many other people is an existential threat to humanity, we have to throw everything out the window, throw capitalism out the window, throw growth out the window. Her premise is that economic growth is in conflict with protecting the environment. And I look at that and I see the exact opposite.
Well, it also needs to be said here that Greta, like so many kids her age, has only skimmed her assignment. She hasn't really read the materials because the IPCC report doesn't say that.
It sure doesn't. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's not what it says. A lot of what the IPCC report says is that there will be damage to the economy, right? So let me tell you, I'm starting out with this premise that I do think that global warming or global climate change is something that can happen, that may be happening, that may be caused by humanity. And if those premises are all true, then they are worth addressing. However, the way in which people like Greta and the ideological left are trying to address climate change, they're doing it in a way that would cause a lot more harm to both the environment and to people who are just trying to survive in this world.
Yeah, it's alarmist.
It's alarmist, and it's a political necessity in many ways, because people like the fact that they have well-heated homes, that's easy to travel, that it's easy to be comfortable in this society. And if you don't make it an existential crisis, if you don't create the emergency, then in their minds, people won't be motivated enough to act. Now the problem is that when you do that, you also create a sense of nihilism too. And it's so interesting. Like the thing that really caught my attention about this when I was first listening to Greta speak and to hear students speak is they're like, why would we go to school? Our world's going to end in 10 years. I need to be out forcing my government to make a change to address the climate, to address CO2 production. And it's just the opposite solution we need. We need more students in school learning about the science and trying to find ways to address climate change. If that's your goal, you really need to be in school, because there are a lot of interesting technological solutions to climate change that aren't being addressed in this. Now we're going a little bit all over, so we've kind of covered some of the broad bases of topics here. So when I'm looking at this problem again, let's talk about whether or not this is an existential crisis, right? So that's the premise that they've set out, because that's supposed to motivate you to take action.
By the way, can we also point out, not to get too, I don't want to get ahead of you here, but
right.
I mean, there's so much history of climate alarmism.
Yeah.
It goes back like 120 years. They've been saying that human activity is going to cause the end of the Earth since the 1890s.
I mean, it's been going on for a while, right?
With by the way, the attendant alarmist short time frame. Something needs to be done now. That's always part of the rubric.
So I mean, we can even go back to Thomas Malthus, right? Where Thomas Malthus, he said that food production was growing arithmetically and population was growing exponentially. Therefore, we're going to run out of food. There's a lot of these technological people underestimate our humans' ability to adapt technology to the situations around them. Because if there's one thing people are good at, it's figuring out how to adapt in changing conditions, right? So these predictions of environmental catastrophe have been wrong for a very, very long time, because people don't have enough faith in humanity without using violence, which is what, the climate activists are advocating for. Let me be clear. They don't have the faith in humanity to be able to address these problems, but we always have. Thomas Malthus. You know what actually caught my attention this morning? It's not Malthus exactly. The thing that was trending on Twitter this morning was #EatTheBabies.
Oh yeah,
did you?
Yes, that's you know what that's all about, right? I mean, you understand what?
No, I got the reference. So #Eat the.
Well, no, but I mean, what it was basically street theater.
Yeah, it was.
It was just basically the AOC. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was being punked by these Trump supporters, and hilariously so, by the way, I have to say.
Yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed in some of the conservative news sites who are like proposing this as like a genuine thing, right? But it's
Jackson from Henrietta
eating babies, really? Is being seriously.
Oh yeah, no. There's some news outlets who are like, oh, look at like what this climate alarmism has inspired.
Oh,
it has inspired a lot of nihilism. It really has, but it's a reference to Jonathan Swift, A Modest Proposal.
Right.
And he he had suggested that we eat people to kind of address problems of poverty.
Right.
So it's been punked, but that's what I saw this morning, and it ties back into the climate alarmism, even though this is a troll, is an interesting thing.
Jackson.
Yeah, it sounds like we have a caller on the line.
Yeah, we have Jackson on the line. Hey, Jackson, how you doing?
Hey, man, but don't you think the biggest danger is the complete American idiot who buys into the 16-year-old CIA agent who's been coached by the globalists and all the other fronts that are looking to wipe out capitalism and turn us into a world socialist state? Who is so stupid they buy into this?
Well, I would steer you, by the way, to the National Review. There's a great piece that was written late last week, I think it was, right after Greta Thunberg made her appearance at the UN. It's titled "Lisa Simpson Crossed with Bane, Greta Thunberg," and it's written by their chief commentator Kyle Smith, and it's absolutely hilarious. I don't think Jackson, there's any imminent danger of people taking Greta Thunberg that seriously.
No, but the problem is, I mean, Adolf Hitler had a saying that said, "Give me your youth." This is the problem. We have 16, 14, 12-year-old kids right now who buy into this because they're stupid kids.
Well, misinformed.
Yeah, and so let me address this way. Is I think that people like her are genuine. They really believe and have convinced themselves that the world is going to end, and that's part of what makes it a little bit more frightening. I think that there are a lot of kids who they've heard this now for their entire life as they're developing their view on the world.
Oh, right? No, they're brainwashed. No, Jackson's right. No question about it.
And again, I think there's at least a solid element of genuine concern about the environment that I share. We should protect the environment. We should, if climate change is real, do things to mitigate it. But again, it's what do we do about it and what's going to be effective about it, right? Because the agenda that many people in the climate action community suggest is they say that addressing global warming, addressing global climate change requires the elimination of capitalism. And that's dangerous.
Yeah, that's dangerous and stupid, and that's what's never going to fly.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get back from the break, because capitalism is what is going to save the environment, and capitalism is what, again, keeps people alive and thriving. So we'll talk about that after the break.
Greatest engine for human prosperity and success in the history of mankind is capitalism. We'll talk more about that. Coming back, Kevin Wilson in for Andrew here on Radio Free New York.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovation should be your first call. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
A reminder from Abate Monroe County. American bikers aim toward education. Distracted driving is dangerous, so pull over and eat. Don't try to read your mail and newspaper, and stay off your cell phone. Make a mental note to be alert, making it a habit to expect the unexpected. Remember to look twice. Save a life. Train yourself to watch for motorcycles which are harder to see. Join Abate, and your family will be protected with a free $4,000 accident policy. Ride safe. Ride free. Ride often. Abate. If you ride with us. Google Abate Monroe County. You're listening to Radio Free New York on the WYSL stations.
Again, Kevin Wilson in for Andrew Hollister on this edition of Radio Free New York. And by the way, happy to talk with you. If you have any input, 346-3000. If you're out of the Rochester, New York calling area, 866-552-1009 is the toll-free number. Kevin, there's just one quick quote I wanted to pass along here just to set the table here from the National Review piece. Greta Thunberg sailed to the U.S. on her famously eco-friendly yacht Publicity Stunt. I don't know if that's really the name of the boat or not, which we later learned required 2 Europeans to fly over here to retrieve it. In the gonzo math of climate change, 2 flights plus a water crossing produced fewer moral emissions than 1 flight. The Thunbergians declared she would make up for this by buying climate credits. This is the part of climate change that kills me. That's also what Al Gore and Leo DiCaprio say when they're getting on a Gulf Stream to fly to the next climate conference. If she just wanted to deliver a speech, why didn't she spend the time it takes to cross the Atlantic planting trees instead and then speak to us all from her bedroom? Maybe because, quote, teen uploads YouTube video is a stretch for even CNN to label as breaking.
Oh, man.
It's a great piece. That's hilarious.
That's great. No, and guys, giving more money to the government is not going to save the environment. I promise you. The government's one of the biggest polluters in the world. Just it's not going to help.
Well, and not just our government either. I mean, we're talking about the world climate, right?
Exactly.
So what's going on in India and China these days? Not good things environmentally.
No, I mean, and to be fair, when you have a country that's developing, there's going to be more pollution because people are more concerned with their day-to-day survival than they are about protecting the environment. What do they want to do? They want to go get trees for firewood. They want to just have a warm house. They want to be able to turn on the lights. So, like, being able to have those basic necessities that we take for granted is their day-to-day life. They've got to spend a lot of time, a lot of work. Capitalism has eliminated our need to think about that on a day-to-day basis. We are so wealthy that now we have time to think about, well, how do we preserve the world around us? And there's a really interesting article on a website called humanprogress.org, which is endlessly optimistic. I love this site, but they talk about how the article I'm reading is why some environmentalists don't appreciate prosperity. And it makes that exact point, is that when you are poor, when you're living in desperate poverty, you don't think about this stuff. But when you're rich, you have the luxury to think about these types of things. We can produce electricity for cheaper. Think about how much effort it took to just make a candle 200 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And how much of an environmental impact that had to make that candle, or how much of an environmental impact it had to heat your house all winter. It's huge. In developed countries, we're seeing reforestation at a rapid rate right now because, again, we don't need to keep chopping down those trees. And we can spend the extra resources to be able to do that, to be able to appreciate the world that we live in. So if you want people to care about the environment, we need capitalism to be able to do that. Because in those socialist countries, in the second world countries, again, they are worried about how do I get my next meal and how do I keep from freezing to death tonight? You're not going to worry about whether or not you're planting trees. You don't have the luxury to go think about planting trees anymore.
You know, it's really interesting. If I don't know if you ever had a chance to tour some robber baron mansion, let's say from 125 years ago. Like, for example, when I was in Pittsburgh, I toured the Henry Clay Frick's mansion, which is up in this still Tony section of Pittsburgh called Squirrel Hill. And you know, you tour this place and you take a look at it, and he had this was a technological marvel in its era. He had this shower. It was a shower stall that was it was all marble, and it had like hot water taps that you could mix hot and cold water, and stand there in this waterfall shower. And I mean, the average middle class home in the suburbs has had that kind of technology for 40 years.
Yeah.
And on and on, electricity in every room, and electric heat and things of that nature. And what has raised the level of the standard of living in this country to where the average middle class American lives much better. And by the way, it's also true in other countries as well, not just in America. Much better than the robber barons of the 1890s did.
Yeah.
What made that happen? What made that happen was capitalism, that's the aggregation of value, which occurs when you take resources out of the ground, when you raise crops, when you cut down trees, when you remove minerals from the ground and you turn them into steel and aluminum and so forth, and then you make useful things out of that. That adds value to those materials. And that's what creates the middle class, and that's what drives the economic engine and the quality of life in the world.
Yeah, and we're seeing around the world right now in countries that are starting to embrace capitalism and take on the corruption that their governments have been plagued with corruption for a very long time. We're seeing those rising standards of living, and it would be absolutely immoral to deny those people the right to be able to have the same living standard that we have, to be able to live comfortably, to be able to turn on a light and not think about it, to be able to have a warm house. That's happening in Africa. That's happening in India. That's happening in China right now. Those people just want to survive. And if we were to implement some of the changes that the climate strike activists are advocating for, it would make their lives worse. It may actually kill some of those people.
I think it would. Undoubtedly, it will kill people.
Yeah.
What they're trying to do is this climate activism is reductionist. Basically, what they want us to do is they want us to give up
our cars. They want us to give up our standard of living. They want us to live in little pack and stack houses in cities and walk to work. I don't know what they intend to do with all the suburbs, but that's not the way to advance the human condition.
Yeah.
Because what advances the human condition is the need and the yearning to strive and to do better and to grow.
Yeah. Now, and I'll say, I'm kind of an urbanist guy. I don't know if I've talked about it on this show before. Like, I don't really mind. I like living in an area where I can walk to things, where, I don't need a big lot. I'd rather ride my bike than drive to something. And that's great. And I think in the absence of subsidy, probably more people would live like that. And that's just fine. But I don't want to deny people the right, as long as it's not as long as I'm not paying for it. If you want to go live out in the suburbs, that's fine. Again, and if you want to improve your life, that's great. Who am I to deny you making your life more comfortable? As long as you're not hurting people or taking their stuff, that's fine.
And see, what you're advocating here is another aspect of what advances the human condition, and that is freedom.
That's
freedom
right.
of choice. So you want to ride your bike and you want to live close to work, that's great. God love you. I think that's terrific. I don't want to ride to Wegmans in a snowstorm, especially since I can't even hook the plastic bags on my bike anymore.
Don't be because Pop.
Plastic bags are going to go away. I want to ride in an air-conditioned and heated car, thanks. But look, I mean, that's great. You want to do that? That's fine. And if I want to live in a suburban house where I have 3/4 of an acre that I have to mow all the time, I don't, by the way. But if I want that, I should have the right to do that.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And again, it's in these other countries, people like Greta, and she's young, and again, I want to give some grace because she is still a child, but people like her and in the more advanced climate activists, they don't consider what's going to happen to the people in the third world when these types of reforms happen, when the climate action policy that they want to implement happens to them. They're thinking about themselves, they're thinking about the abundance that they have, and if we just reduce it a little bit. No, if it's happening to those people in Africa and India and other parts of Asia, like, that's really going to hurt them. It's really going to kill people. It's really a dangerous, fundamentally unethical thing.
Well, now, it's also going to have, I mean, we're seeing this with the Hong Kong protests. It's also going to have a tremendous political fallout, and people die in cases of, armed, technologically motivated government going up against the general population. Generally, it's not good for the human condition.
No, it's really not. And that's something I'd like to talk about more. But I do want to make one more point, is that when we live in a world where we have the extra resources to be able to do something about it, we can start to mitigate the effects of climate change, right? Like, so let's go with the assumption that climate change is real and worth addressing. So let's just go with that. We are now developing technologies like being able to remove carbon from the atmosphere. We're developing things like that, where we're able to take, like, I'm seeing like they have like algae things that they're able to pull CO2 out of the atmosphere and start to offset some of the carbon produced by things like cars and whatever. And again, we also have things like electric cars that are starting to develop. They have their own environmental impacts. They really do. But we're starting to produce less carbon because cars are getting more efficient. We don't have the resources to drive cars to be more efficient unless we have capitalism. And we're also doing things like developing nuclear power. And what's really interesting is that the climate strike marchers are against nuclear power, which is the strangest thing to me.
It is. It's very strange.
Nuclear power is probably the best solution for being able to produce electricity on a mass scale that is essentially zero carbon output, right? People look at things like, did you ever see the HBO series Chernobyl?
No.
You didn't see that? Well, it's a pretty good series, right? But people saw that and they're like, oh my goodness, look how dangerous nuclear power is.
No.
If you watch Chernobyl, and if you're willing to pay HBO for it, it's worth it. if you watched that series and thought, wow, nuclear power is so dangerous, you got the wrong message out of that. The message of that show is that government is incompetent and out to protect itself. So they're willing to cover up an ecological disaster in order to cover their own butts.
Yes. And the real message you should take away from the Chernobyl series, and the reason I didn't watch it is because it's mostly, I'm glad you enjoyed it. But in terms of factual content, there's a lot of bunk.
Oh, yeah. No, it wasn't.
And you're right. And one of the major problems is the fact you come away with the impression that nuclear power is dangerous. Well, anything built by the Soviets in the 1970s or 80s is dangerous. They had the TV sets that would burn your house down.
They would, and they didn't care, and there's no one to hold them accountable.
Exactly, no accountability.
But nuclear power developed nowadays has the potential to produce all the energy that we need with very little danger. But climate alarmists are afraid to embrace it, and that's a shame.
Well, I think it's because the problem is nuclear power interferes with their hidden agenda of doing away with capitalism and replacing it with socialism.
Yeah, you might be right on that.
I think I am. But I don't know. We'll find out, won't we? Radio Free New York, back in a minute.
You're listening to the voice of liberty.
WYSL.
AM 1040 Avon, Rochester, FM 92.1 Rochester, FM 95.5 Spencerport, and WYSL1040.com everywhere.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to Simple Tech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that Simple Tech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at Simple Tech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at Simple Tech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
Aircraft Environmental Systems proudly supports Radio Free New York. Rochester-based leaders in climate simulation chambers for America's R&D laboratories. We're experts in troubleshooting, calibrations, custom designs, and consulting for more than 40 years. Industry pioneers, we created the first ever fleet of temperature, humidity, and altitude test chambers available to rent coast to coast. Trained and trusted by environmental chamber manufacturers, we are ACES. Find us at acesinc.com.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance. Keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovations should be your first call. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
Radio Free New York on WYSL, AM 1040, FM 92.1, and FM 95.5 West.
All right, we're back here on Radio Free New York again. This is Kevin Wilson subbing in for Andrew Hollister today. We were talking about nuclear power and again, nuclear power is one of the safest forms of electricity in the world right now. And in fact, 0 people have died from it in anything in the last 20 years. The whole Chernobyl incident was really a result of government incompetence. And we were talking over the break about some of the other instances of government incompetence within the Soviet Union. And I highly recommend that you read up on that. But today's nuclear power reactors, they haven't killed anyone. More people have died installing solar panels than have died from nuclear power in the last several decades. And really, we've been effective at dealing with the waste products of that too. They now have fast reactors that are able to deal with the waste products. So there's no reason why we shouldn't switch to that. But the problem with a lot of these climate activists is they're less worried about the science of trying to address the problems of climate change and more about pushing their ideology, as Bob suggested. And really, they're doing themselves a disservice, because anytime we need to enact a policy like this, like again, if we accept the premise that we as a society need to address this, there's going to be trade-offs. And all I ask from people who are environmentalists and who think this is a serious problem is that you consider what some of those trade-offs are. Because as I mentioned, those people developing in the third world, developing their economies in the third world, this really affects them. This affects us here in the United States too, right? If you put limits on the ability of our economy to grow, not only does that make people's quality of life suffer, it also, makes it harder for us to address climate change itself. Now, it sounds like we have a caller on the line again.
Yeah, I believe we have Eric on the line. Hey, Eric, what's up?
How you doing, guys? Thanks for sitting in today, Kevin.
Yeah.
Good show. I was just heard you talking about nuclear energy. I generally agree, but what I didn't hear you mention is Fukushima. And what's going on with that, or what happened with it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Eric.
Why don't you fill us in on it? Yeah. What do you know about it, Eric?
Isn't that still spewing nuclear waste into the ocean, or no? Or?
I don't think so. No, I think that the problem has been they're trying to recapture all the fuel that's in there, and of course I don't, I've got to read up more on Fukushima, because I know it was a huge plant that was damaged by an earthquake.
Yeah.
And why that happened in a free market economy, I'm not quite sure, because you would think they would foresee that. Earthquakes are not unknown in Japan.
Yeah. Earthquake and tsunamis, when you build it in that area, that was a risk, and lesson learned from that. And here's the interesting thing about some of the nuclear disasters too. So we think of famous ones like Fukushima, Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island. All of those disasters had a much smaller impact than we expected, right? Like the amount of radiation put into the atmosphere from 3 Mile Island was almost negligible.
Even Chernobyl, which was, we want to talk about a worst case scenario. I mean, that was a reactor built with no containment.
Yeah,
there was no containment vessel, and it literally just turned into a hydrogen bomb, which exploded. By the way, that was what exploded. It was not a nuclear explosion.
Yeah,
it was the accumulation of flammable gases created by the thermal runaway in the reactor.
Yeah, now people are giving tours of that area too, which is
yeah, exactly. What else you got, Eric?
No, well, that was about it. I was just thinking that we haven't heard about Fukushima in some time. The story died off kind of like the Epstein case did.
Gosh, that's a whole other can of worms. Yeah,
not quite. No, nobody hung themselves in the nuclear plant, I don't think. But anyway, thanks for the call. Appreciate that. I plead guilty to not knowing that much about Fukushima.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've read about it recently, just a little bit, is basically they were very worried about radiation leaking into the ocean, but a lot of that they've been either able to recapture, or it hasn't been as much of an effect as they thought. There's naturally uranium that kind of floats around in the ocean too. It's interesting because they're using that to capture uranium that they can then use in nuclear fuel later on.
Okay.
So that's one of the interesting things about that. And again, it just.
Meanwhile, on the other end of the equation, are you familiar with SMRs? Have you ever read up on those?
Well, tell me about
small modular reactors. This is something that I think Toshiba has been the leading proponent of these things, and it's a great thing. It's about the size of, I don't know, probably a big piano.
Mm-hmm.
And they can sink these SMRs. They bury them like 60 feet down. And they're completely fueled up, and they require no human intervention for 30 years. There's no way that they can explode. There's no way that they can go critical. And these SMRs will generate electricity enough to power a city of 30 or 40,000 people for, like I say, 30 or 40, 50 years with absolutely no refueling or attention or monitoring or anything necessary. It just goes down the ground. It's terrorism proof.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of technology that, again, we're talking about technology that changes people's lives, that makes life better for humans on Earth, and has zero environmental impact.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see because some of this new technology coming out, like it's the objection to a lot of nuclear power plants being built is that they're very, very expensive to build, right? But why are they very expensive to build? Is because the government is worried about something happening. And it'll be really interesting to see if the government like lets some of these like these SMRs and other new technologies start to get into commercial use. We might start to see like the free market production of nuclear energy.
That's the other thing about the SMR too. It's economical to build.
It's not that expensive. We just have to be able to get through some of the regulatory hangups on that to start to be able to address that. And again, if you're concerned about climate change, you're concerned about coal producing plants, and you want to reduce like pollution in the area, because coal plants do produce pollution, not just CO2, but like other pollutants as well. You want to get that stuff out of here. Here are some of the technologies that we can start to embrace to do that. And again, to me, I mean, this is just a libertarian to me. It's like, well, I'd rather start to get some of those regulatory barriers out of the way so people are able to do this technology safely.
Perfect example, hydrofracking in New York State. Now, I know there's some people out there who are going to start going apoplectic because hydrofracking is supposedly dangerous. It's not. Hydrofracking has been around for 60 years. There have been no serious accidents involving hydrofracking. There are serious accidents involving tractor trailers.
Yeah.
I mean, these kinds of, they crash off the road and they kill people. But that's not what we're talking about. There's nothing wrong with the technology in a tractor trailer, and there's nothing wrong with the technology in hydrofracking. And it's insane that New York State is standing on its own energy hose, where we could be cashing in on the bounty of natural gas available to us. What a tremendous boon that would be to the economy in the southern tier. And if you need proof of that, go to northern Pennsylvania. Just go over the border and look at what those towns look like.
Yeah, and that's a great example though of how like a lot of times people will take anecdotal stories about stuff happening related to technology and inflate that to assume that the entire technology is unsafe, right? So, I mean, we do it with vaping, we do it with nuclear, we do it with fracking too. Again, fracking is a great way to be able to use the natural gas. That's an incredible resource in New York State. And again, all I ask is that if there is something that goes on, those companies are held liable for that, and I think that's a fair ask, right? But why shouldn't we embrace this technology?
There's no good reason for it. It's just because of political posturing by Andrew Cuomo. We all know that.
Right. Well, he's very good at that.
That's basically what his act is.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Although, small sidebar on that, I did see that the e-cigarette vaping ban for flavored juices did get temporarily held.
Yeah, a court has nixed that temporarily.
So I know that's something that Andrew's talked about in a couple of previous shows. So the New York State Health Commission is saying that they're going to fight that. They're still going to try to take your right away to smoke flavored vaping products, or to vape flavored vaping products.
Right.
Sorry. We'll see. I really hope they win in court in this one, because the prohibitionist mindset on this thing just drives me nuts. It's
a control freak mentality that proceeds from Andrew Cuomo, and his philosophy is that we're all just a bunch of errant, not very bright children who need the constant hand of government to tell us what to do and how to do it.
So I'm almost more cynical than that. I think there is a need in politics to always look like you're doing something to address any sort of crisis, right? Yeah. So it doesn't matter if what you're doing is actively harmful to the people that you're trying to protect. The important thing is you look like you're taking action. There is a crisis. The media has said that there's a crisis. Therefore, you have to take action on that. Otherwise, gosh darn it, we need to elect someone else who will do something. And
especially now that the media has become basically an offshoot of government. It's basically become the press corps of government.
Well, you're not the press corps of government, are you?
No, I'm not.
Oh, good.
That's why we're the voice of liberty. See?
That's right.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, we're going to take another break here on Radio Free New York. Kevin Wilson, Libertarian at Large, in for Andrew Hollister this week. We'll be right back.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovations should be your first call. They've won the Best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
Fiorella, a family-owned farm-to-table Italian restaurant with casual atmosphere at the newly renovated Rochester Public Market. Fiorella offers wood-fired, old-world-style pizza with naturally leavened dough, house-made fresh pasta, desserts, and gelato. Enjoy craft beers, imported Italian and New York State wines. Open Wednesday through Saturday for lunch and dinner. Wednesday evenings enjoy no corkage fee, and Thursday is gnocchi night. Call 434-5705 for reservations. View the menu on the web, restaurantfiorella.com.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to Simple Tech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that Simple Tech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at Simple Tech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the Best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating.
Last spot.
If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at Simple Tech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
You're listening to Radio Free New York on the WYSL station.
Kevin Wilson in for Andrew Hollister this Friday on Radio Free New York. And further to our conversation earlier about the fake issues that are being posed by politicians to make us feel like we really need them. H.L. Mencken. Now, this goes back 100 years. Yeah. A humorist and a columnist and everything. So it just goes to show that the only thing that really changes is technology. People don't, right? I mean, we're the same people we were, human beings we were in 1300 or whatever. The whole aim of practical politics is to keep the populace alarmed and hence clamorous to be led to safety by an endless series of hobgoblins, most of them imaginary.
Wow, that's absolutely relevant to this conversation. And there's man, I love H.L. Mencken quotes. They're so great. But there's this great article by Scott Adams. So the guy who does the Dilbert comics. I don't always agree with him, but he wrote this great article called "A Message for Children About Climate Change," and it's speaking specifically to the children who are being frightened by this thing, the people like Greta, right? And it talks about, like, look, here are things that we can do about it. Here's why you don't need to be fearful. Here's why you don't need to run into the safe arms of the politicians who promise to do something about it, right? And it addresses a lot of these things. It gives them the science, and it talks about realistic ways in which we can address climate change. And I think I don't know if he's a climate skeptic, but he does give some really interesting solutions there, from nuclear energy to carbon offsets to planting trees, right? Things like that. But what I worry about is you have another new generation who's being taught that there's an existential crisis in the hand, that they need to run into the politicians for safety. And it's not only bad from a political perspective, it's bad from a mental health perspective too. Like, these children are getting real climate anxiety. They think that their world is going to end.
I think it's abuse. I really do. I mean, these climate alarmists, First of all, they brainwash these kids who do not have the maturity to do real critical thinking and to really evaluate the data that's coming their way.
Yeah.
And then they propel like a Greta Thunberg in front of news cameras, and basically they're being used. The term that was used last week when all of this was forefront in the news was they're human shields.
Yeah.
They're being advanced to insulate the climate alarmists from any criticism, because otherwise you're attacking children.
Right. And you don't want to look like you're attacking a child. Like, oh, why would you be mean to a child? Like, well, I'm not being mean, but like, we need to look at this realistically. And I'm not saying that to be a jerk about it, but I am saying like we do need to look at science. And just because a child says like we need to do something right now and we need to end capitalism in a couple of years doesn't mean that we need to act on that. Right? Like we need to be telling these children like, all right, this is a problem you care about. I'm glad you care about that. Great. Here are things that we can do about it that are realistic though. Like if you're, and it's just, gosh, it's really irresponsible and cynical for political activists in the climate change community to use children in this way.
And it's also, yes, and these kids in their age of innocence should not be subjected to hobgoblins, to use Mencken's term. When I grew up, when I was growing up in the late 50s and early 60s, and we had a very real threat that was hovering over us then, which was nuclear Armageddon.
Yeah.
Mutually assured destruction. And we had the drills in school, mm-hmm. where you ran downstairs to the boiler room, when the alarm went off, and you hid your face. We didn't ever do duck and cover, where we went underneath the desks, but that happened in a lot of schools. And there was a lot of fear about that kind of thing. I remember having a conversation with my dad about it, I saw some thing on TV, or maybe it was a newsreel in the movie theater about the nuclear threat. And what my dad said to me was, and this is the lesson, by the way, that should be carried forward to parents of today dealing with the climate issue. He said, you know something? Nothing's ever going to happen to you that's going to prevent you from having a full and prosperous and great life. You're going to have a great life. Everything's going to be okay. There's nothing out there that's going to get you. The only thing that you have to worry about is developing a good work ethic, being a good person, and learning to achieve and strive for things. If you do that, you're going to be fine. And then I said, okay, good night, Pop.
Yeah.
And I went to sleep and I was fine. And that's what you need to say to kids about climate change. There's nothing going to happen with the climate right now that has to do with CO2 that's going to cause the world to end in 8 months or 10 years or 12 years or whatever the constantly moving timeline is. And to drill that into kids, I think it's child abuse.
Yeah, and it gives them a ton of anxiety about their future that is not true, because again, the world is not going to end in 10 years. It's not. Worst case scenario, there may be serious ecological disasters, but the world is not going to end.
They'll be localized. They're going to be ecological disasters on the order of hurricanes in Florida.
And by the way, climate-caused deaths, so things like hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, things like that, the number of people dying from that has dropped a ton.
Yes.
In the 20th and 21st centuries. Like, we've gotten a lot better at addressing, like, when these natural disasters happen, how to get people out, how to get them to safety, how to shelter them. We're very, very good at that, and we're getting better.
And again, the forecasting is much better now, so we know when they're coming. They're not a surprise. I mean, when the hurricane hit Galveston in September of 1900, 10,000 people died.
Yeah.
So just chew on that for a minute.
It's mind-boggling. Like, something like that happening today is unthinkable in the U.S., right? I mean, it does happen in other parts of the world, but again, as our economies develop, we get better at addressing those things. Now, the costs of some of those ecological disasters are going up, but that's also because we have more stuff, right? We're building more houses on the coast. Maybe that's not the best thing. The government subsidizes that, but that's a whole other issue. The cost of these things is going up. However, you are more likely to survive a climate-related disaster now than you were 100 years ago by like 100 times. It's, again, not something that we should be subjecting our children to. We do that all the time. We do it with this. We do it with where they have like blanks where they're doing the active shooter drills in school. with them. Like this, it's another
they're shooting blanks.
Yeah, there's like, so yeah. Have you heard about this? They did this in Ohio school. Like, so they're teaching kids, like they're teaching kids to do like active shooter drills a lot more often in schools.
Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Well, I don't like it.
Depending on how it's done, right?
Right. Depending on how it's done, right? Like if you do that and you're doing it in a way that traumatizes kids and makes them seem like a school shooting is a certainty, that's awful to do. It's awful to tell your kids. Again, the chances of that happening, it does happen, but the chances of that happening are very, very small. And school staff should be prepared for that.
Yeah, school shootings are way down. They're like half of what they were in the 1970s. And I'm not trivializing the school shootings that have happened, but I mean, in terms of and there's alarmism there as well. That gets us into a Second Amendment discussion, which is another whole era.
Yeah, but just related to that, again, it's tying this all together. It's, again, using kids and instilling fear in kids to push an ideological agenda in a way that seriously harms their mental health and does so in a way that's not effective for addressing the climate. It's not addressing the gun violence either, although we haven't spent much time talking about that. But again, you don't need to run to the government for safety. Again, things are for the most part getting better. There are bad things happening out there, but things for the most part are getting better. And if we embrace solutions with freedom, if we embrace solutions through capitalism, the world is going to continue getting better. And again, I love reading sites like humanprogress.org, which show you, like, here are the ways in which the world is getting better thanks to capitalism, thanks to having freedom, thanks to, all these other factors that have gone into creating the modern world that is still imperfect, but always getting better.
Yeah, look, I mean, Greta Thunberg is talking about how basically, paraphrasing, she's saying that we've ruined her life because we're irresponsible when it comes to climate change, and her life is trashed. No, it's not. Your life is not trashed, Greta, or any of you kids who are listening out there.
Not taken away her childhood.
The National Review columnist made the comment that the 16 years that she's been alive have almost certainly been probably the best 16 years to be a human being in the history of human existence.
Yeah.
Medical, breakthroughs, treatments for disease, war is way down, and believe it or not, environmental issues are much less of a problem than they were, in recent years even.
Yeah. And I said, again, you identify these problems. I won't be Pollyanna-ish about this. You identify these real problems, like, do something about it. But it doesn't require, like, again, destroying and remaking the society that we have now, because there's a lot of good things going on too. And we need to take the elements that work and then take the wealth that we've been able to generate from capitalism to try to either mitigate the damage from climate change or to reverse it, right? Again, to save people, or to find these other solutions that, like nuclear power or renewable energy or whatever it is, to be able to address these effectively. And we're not going to do that by putting our trust in politicians all the time, because guess what? They're looking out for themselves, and their solutions oftentimes end up hurting more people than it helps.
No question about it. And by the way, capitalism has certainly had its issues over the years, especially in the early years when it was a cruel economic system. You think of, again, back to the robber barons and the people who worked in the steel mills and the horrible industrial accidents and everything. But that's history. I mean, that's 150 years ago. Capitalism now is a tremendous engine for change. It's not perfect. It obviously needs to be watched like any other powerful thing.
It doesn't need to be perfect, just needs to be better than the alternative. And that's the message I always say, is like,
perfect.
It doesn't, yeah.
Great way to put it. Yeah.
Right. So, oh man, I wish I'd ended on that.
Well, we're within 20 or 25 seconds, so you just pretty much have.
So,
but
you know what? Well, if we got to
throw the baby out with the bathwater here economically, right?
No, exactly. And that's really what it is again, work towards these solutions realistically using the frame of capitalism. It's not perfect. I'm not going to claim that capitalism is perfect, but it does provide a mechanism for providing value to people and generating wealth in a way that can help address some of these other problems that would feel frivolous in a society 500 years ago, or frivolous in a third world developing society right now.
Yeah, so you don't want central planning, folks. You really don't.
That's right. So thanks so much for listening in today. Again, this is Kevin Wilson subbing in for Andrew Hollister. You can find me at Kevin Wilson ROC on Twitter, or my Facebook page, Kevin Wilson Libertarian. I've tagged it in Andrew's Facebook Live, so hope to be back sometime in the future, Bob.
Anytime, Kevin. Always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us on Radio Free New York.